James and I were just talking about how everything that we've done here, we've lined up the bottom so that the top all lines up perfectly, and we just explained a little bit about why that's the case. I know from my perspective, one of the reasons I always like the top to be perfectly flat is if I ever have to put trim or something, I can actually measure from the top and it's going to be the same all the way across. And the other point that James brought up was there's so many times where you're going to be shooting this where they're going to want more height. That's why we're not using 8-foot flats, even though most of the time you're only going to have 8 feet in the shot. We're using 10-foot flats, so if we ever have to pull back a little bit, you're not going to see the very top of it.
And the second you get it out of a studio this size, every single time I have a studio this size, it's a minimum 12-foot height. Like they wouldn't, it was just assumed it's 12-foot height. And so sometimes that's a bunch of 4x8s and 4x10s a long ways along the top, or 2-footers on top of 10-footers. But almost always it goes up to 14 or 16. Just a second they pull back and they're like, oh, we have no headers. So the second they pull back in a wide shot, they're looking right over the top of the flats, which is why often there are drop ceilings or plugs in the ceilings, or sometimes you can get canvas flats that sit over top of these flats, and that's a ceiling flat. Yeah, almost every set I've done, make it taller.
If we were in a situation where we had to keep on pulling back and we couldn't add any more height, and all of a sudden we had to actually put a ceiling on it, if all those flats were uneven, we're not going to be able to put the ceiling on very easily. So it's about making your life easier down the road. So we're putting these two flats together to have an outside corner. So if you want to just come over this way, you can see how these two flats are going to be oriented. So when we do it like this, you actually see the edge of one of the flats. Unlike one of the inside corners where we could just butt it together and overlap the faces, over here you get to see that nice ugly piece of pine. Now, this is going to be more important if we were dealing with flats that looked better than these ones look, where you wouldn't want to see, like I can actually see some wide crown staples, I can see the actual pine, I can see the seam from the flat, and we want to do something to try and cover that up. The easiest way to do this is we actually just take a strip of Luan, so the exact same material, and we actually apply it to this face. And we're just going to be able to put that on with some staples. And the important thing to note here is as soon as we apply this, we've effectively made this wall wider. So we have to make sure that this piece ends up flush to the face of the Luan, not to the face of the pine. So we're going to put this wall back just a little bit, just lean it against something so it's out of the way. We're going to attach our Luan, and then we're going to attach our flat to it. Sometimes if you're building a set from scratch, what you'll do is you'll build a flat with a flyover. And what that means is the face of this flat will actually, like the actual Luan, the 1/4-inch Luan, will extend past the frame so that the entire flat can just overlap that edge and you don't have to worry about having another seam. Okay? Okay, so we've now screwed these together. We screwed them together much in the same way where we would screw together other flats, where we're screwing them at 0, 2 feet, 4 feet, 6 feet, etc. But now you can see that this face of the Luan that we've applied is flush to the new flat. Yes, we're going to have to fill these seams, and yes, we're going to have to do something around the outside corner, but we're going to get a much better surface here than spending all day trying to fill the staple holes and trying to make pine not look like pine. So that's it for the outside corner. Now we're going to move on to the next section. Okay, we're doing another inside corner. We're on the back of the walls right now. This inside corner we're going to attach a little bit differently. The other ones we would actually just butt our flats up against one another and just screw it flat to flat. Occasionally, depending on what you have on the faces of the flats, like say there was any trim or something like that, you might not be able to actually just butt one up against the other. So the other method for joining two flats in an inside corner is to actually use a piece of whaler. So we're going to take this piece of whaler and we're going to screw it to one flat right there, and then we're going to be able to screw it to the other flat, and it's going to strengthen that entire corner. And that's going to be our joint.
So we use the tiles on the ground to square up that corner. And this corner here, I could do the same thing, but if there were no tiles and I wanted to square the corner, I would take a piece of sheet good or a flat or something like that, and I'd stick it up against one of the corners, and then I'd kick it so it was square. So Adam, you let me know when we're good?
Mm-hmm.
Like that?
A little bit more. There you go.
Cool. So that is how you can, one of the many, many ways you could square up corners on a flat. You could also do 3, 4, 5. Measure 3 feet along here, 4 feet along here, and the 2 points, when they're 5 feet apart, that is triangulated so you have a 90-degree corner.